Welcome, family, friends, patriots, and believers, to another edition of The Grid. I'm Shaun Griffin. This week, I'm doing the hosting, and my co-host, the host with the most, Chris Kuhlmann. Chris, thanks for letting me take the reins.
Shaun, thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to be on our show, my show, however you want to call it. Yes, nice to hand you the reins, let you ask some questions, and I get to play spoiler a little bit.
Yeah, invited, drafted, yeah, whatever.
Voluntold, that's one of my favorite words.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most true business buzzwords ever
Yeah, no kidding.
invented. So this week, in this edition, we are talking about selling your house.
Real estate.
Real estate. I know. Doesn't that just sound like a yawner? I've got a pillow over here. Yeah.
Now, to be fair, to prep our audience, we're not
Yes.
talking about the real estate that was completely burned down in Minneapolis during the George Floyd riots that Tim Walz completely went AWOL on. We're not talking about that kind of real
No,
estate,
no, no,
just
we're
in
not
case you
talking
were
about that.
wondering.
And we're not talking about the real estate of the boys' bathroom that they have to use to put tampons on the wall. Not talking about that
Oh,
either.
we didn't need that.
No, we didn't need that. But that's what you get, hundreds of thousands of dollars state by state by putting tampons in the boys' restroom.
We're not talking about the real estate that our current administration almost is demanding that Israel give to the terrorists. Not talking about that real estate either.
No,
We're
no, no,
really
no.
talking about the process of buying and selling real estate. What's the big deal, Shaun?
Well, the big deal is BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. They
BlackRock.
purchased 44% of the houses that were on the market last year. And the idea is they want to buy your house so that they could turn it into a rental, which forces families that are looking to buy a house to have to cough up even more money because these folks have no problem paying above asking price in order to get your house. And the motivation for doing this particular subject this week is that this week I have received 9 phone calls looking to buy my house, which is not on the market. Since I purchased it, it's never been on the market. I literally answer the phone right here. I answer the phone. My property is not for sale. And no, I don't have any other properties for sale. Because that's the second question. And then I look at the screen and I wait for about 10 seconds and then they hang up.
I have said to several of those calls, if you're willing to pay double what I paid for it, let's talk. Otherwise, take me off your list. Yeah, it's pretty common. I've received several of those here. I haven't received 9 in a week, but I've certainly had several of those that I've received. And the article that you shared with me, Shaun, did say these institutional investors are paying substantially above asking price, really above fair market value in many, many cases in order to get your house. Why in the world would they do that?
Well, they're going to do that because they're going to step in, they're going to fix it up just enough to get it so that it's rentable. And then they are going to make money off of your house. They're going to the strategy would literally, once they have, really invaded the area, it would literally force people to have to rent from them. It's control.
So, Shaun, you mentioned Vanguard. I don't remember the other one, and BlackRock. We talked about BlackRock in our ESG podcast, I think. And if we didn't, we certainly should have, because we're going to mention a little bit of that today. Tell us a little bit about BlackRock and some other ties. Why should we be worried that they're literally buying up the housing market?
Well, BlackRock is run by a guy named Larry Fink. You would think these people would change their last name. I mean, it's a dead giveaway. But anyway, he has very close ties with a gentleman named Klaus Schwab. And
Ah,
not Charles Schwab, but Klaus. And Klaus is the CEO of the World Economic Forum, and there's a possibility he may be stepping down.
I think he was
Uh,
the founder.
yeah, he's the founder at the very least, but has been the CEO up until now. And their slogan is, "You will own nothing and be happy." That's part of their strategy, and they have a global strategy. And if you were to look at it, it's basically death by 1,000 cuts, because they have got ideas for everything. Without diving into all of the particulars, they are driven by environmentalism. Okay. Mentalism. These people are crazy. Everything that's environmentalist, they're full tilt boogie with it. Electric everything. Doesn't matter that our electric grids can't handle it right now. Oh, who cares about that? Well, just everyone's going to go electric. They want to do away with us eating meat.
Yes, hope is their
Um,
strategy.
as part of their strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're totally okay with synthetic meat and all that brouhaha. I mean, how healthy is that? Seriously? And they think that bugs are a good source of protein. They want us eating bugs.
Okay, so I haven't read that. I haven't read all of those references in what they're trying to influence. I want to go back to what you said. You said they want to own nothing and be happy about it. So why is BlackRock buying up things if they don't want to own it? Oh, wait,
No,
wait.
no,
They
no,
don't
that's for
want
us. They want
us to own.
us. Yes.
Ha.
You were going to get to that. Yeah. They want us to own nothing. They
Maybe,
want to own it all.
maybe I was baiting just a little bit.
Yeah, probably.
So, Shaun, in a real estate relationship, who has the control? Is it the owner or the renter?
Oh, the owner always has control. Always. They
So,
can they can control the price of the rent. They can legally force you out if they decide that they want to sell the property to somebody else, or they don't want you in it.
so let's just put that on the shelf. Maybe not the shelf. Let's just move it over to the side for a brief moment. Everything you've said is our context. BlackRock's buying this up, Vanguard's buying this up. They want to own real estate, they want to rent it out, they want control, heavy ties to the World Economic Forum. Let's put that right there for context and then talk about briefly ESG, environmental social governance. We've done several podcasts on this. We've talked about this quite a bit. Shaun, who is one of the biggest proponents of ESG in the global corporate world and has all the money?
I would say BlackRock. They
Bingo.
own oh my gosh, it is mind blowing. You probably have the numeric statistics because math is not my forte. Uh, they own a mind blowing number of companies.
Yeah, I don't know the statistic. What I do know is that they push hard on companies. And so people wonder, well, how does that work? How do they push hard on companies? Okay, so let's say that BlackRock takes, I'm going to pick a company that everybody knows. Let's say Apple. Now, Apple's a bad example. Let's say IBM. And what BlackRock does is they invest into that company. They buy up the shares on the stock market and they end up owning 20% of the company. It's not a majority, but it's larger than anyone else. Then what do? They now have seats on the board. And at the shareholders meeting is then they start pushing to say, you will push ESG as part of your overall vision and plan. And if you do not, then we're going to find a new CEO. We're going to find new board members. See, in a lot of those corporations, those board members are actually paid. And so they put a tremendous amount of pressure. They use all this leverage to push this particular agenda. So that's super important context, because if you got that company with those kinds of ties buying up real estate left and right to renters, then we need to remember the conversation around an ESG I would say, to the next level. And what do we talk about? We talk about you as an individual being assigned a what, Shaun? An ESG
For
score, an ESG score that will be much like a credit score. You'll have your FICO and your SGIO, whatever that is, and you have this score. Well, what happens if the person you're renting from says, I got two tenants here. Now this one pays a little bit better than the other one. Is a little bit more on time with their payments, has a better credit score, but man, they're one of those dang religious conservatives. Their ESG score is low. I think they can find somewhere else to rent. And the next thing you know, you can't. That's when you would tell me this story, Shaun, my mind went down those 3 or 4 steps. Am I wrong?
Oh, no, no. And see, that's just it. Their strategy is so pervasive that you can look at all kinds of different industries and they've got a plan for that. They've got their hands in food, they've got their hands in real estate. And as you were pointing out, they own significant chunks of thousands of companies, and they are exerting control just the way you spoke about it. And they are not above encouraging businesses to, these big corporations, they're not above telling them that sometimes you have to forcibly make people change how they do things.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm worried about. So, Shaun, when we were talking on the pre-show prep, I was reading that article about Greg Abbott here in Texas, really trying to push some legislation to stop this. And my first visceral reaction is, I'm a capitalist. It's a free market. Stay out of it. However, I don't think what we've just described to you is pure capitalism. That's really stakeholder capitalism that we talk about. And it's all built around control and coercion. And you know what? I am for stopping that. That's not true free market. And that's what we need to get to as free market.
Right. It's using the free market to eventually make it a controlled market.
The thing is, that almost sounds like a monopoly when you think about it, but it's worse than that because it's not a monopoly to control for profits. It's a monopoly to control for an agenda that's a social agenda. We have to push back against that. And, there's different ways to do it. Obviously, Greg Abbott in Texas is pushing back by trying to promote legislation that would somehow stop that or at least create it more visible. I would imagine that Ron DeSantis is probably going to be on the forefront of this in Florida. However, I've got a different opinion, maybe not a different opinion, maybe a supplemental opinion that controlling this through legislation is only part. I think the transparency and awareness of it is the most important thing because the one thing we've learned through many, I will call them capitalist social phenomena, which would include Chick-fil-A, which would include Bud Light and Dylan Mulvaney, is that the power of the purse in the people's hands when they choose to boycott or to I was about to say riot, protest a particular brand or product, that is powerful because it impacts much faster and it's felt much more deeply. So to me, part of the transparency is for the public to be aware of BlackRock and to push back. And sure, Abbott can pass legislation that tries to restrict this. But if you are going on a massive advertising campaign for the public saying, if you're selling your house to somebody of BlackRock, this is what it means, then maybe we can create some pain points for BlackRock that way.
I agree. I mean, it's like anything. We have all kinds of tools, and any tool can be abused. Capitalism can be abused. So there are it's like we've got free speech, but you can't yell fire in certain places where there's no fire, but there's lots of people who could in running get trampled and somebody could die. There are some common sense things that we could do. I agree with you, and I think that there's only just so much that they can do with legislation. But one of the things that they can do and would it's a raw idea that would need to be developed is make people aware that this is a strategy and it is an evil strategy. And we might ought to just put a disclosure thing that if you are a subsidiary of a company that does this, you have to disclose to the owners the strategy.
Yeah, and in fact, I've talked to a real estate investor recently, not a big corporation, but people selling homes actually care about that. If they know their home is going to be sold to one person and used for low income housing versus another person who's buying it is actually a young family and they need a place for the husband, the wife, and the 4 kids. That does mean something. I know that if I sold my house, I wouldn't feel good about selling it um, to an institutional investor in my neighborhood. So I think you're right, Sean. I think disclosure, which I'll call that just another version of transparency, it's forced transparency, um, is a big step in that direction.
Right. Well, I mean, because if you think about it, how many companies own companies that own companies that own companies? And then you've got these shell companies, and it's all designed so that you legally cannot quickly get to the culprit behind the strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I hear you saying, Sean, and certainly I agree, is what you're saying is this is a microcosm, but a very important cog in the wheel of a globalist agenda. And I thought about, you and I talked about it. I don't think we'll dive too much into it, but you probably saw in the news this week, surrounded by the Olympics, but you probably saw the news that Kamala Harris picked a running mate, Tim Walz from Minnesota. You need to understand this dude is as radical as they come. He almost makes Kamala look like a moderate. That ain't easy to do, folks. So why do I tell you that? So we're talking about Greg Abbott trying to put legislation in place to stop this kind of acquisition of real estate. Ron DeSantis would do the same thing. Tim Walz would be the guy. He and Kamala would be sitting back and saying, the more the merrier, because this accomplishes our agenda. If you remember, the progressive liberal always follows this mantra: the ends justify all means. And in this case, the global ends to this social agenda justifies all methods to get there. And you need to understand, and that's why this election is important, is that they're going to be pushing this, accepting this. They're going to be prioritizing this. They're going to have it so out front and center. They're going to be promoting it. They're going to be promoting this kind of activity. Why? Because it helps them. And I personally feel, Sean, because it has a direct impact on what I say is the American dream. We know that America is about freedom, but one of the things that comes with freedom is the ability to own individual property. That one of the things that is absolutely consistent with a communist state and a social state is there's not individual liberty to own property, personal property, real estate, things like that. The state owns it, the aristocrats own it, high-ranking individuals, corporations own it, but the people do not. This feels like this is pushing us towards that kind of socialist democracy or even communism.
And their message is rather schizophrenic. If you actually pay attention when they talk about real estate, they're going to want to talk about getting Black families into housing. That's a big deal. But that actually goes counter to what you were just referring to. It goes counter to their socialist and Marxist agenda. So it's like their communication is completely schizo.
It is. And I want to clarify or add to what you just said. I'm all for Black families getting into housing, as I am white families and brown
Yes.
families and anybody else. That's not the issue. What Sean is referencing is that when you use that as your rallying cry, then what you effectively do is you shut off any counter argument because you're just racist if you do. If you say, well, wait a second, I don't agree with that. Oh, you don't want Black families into housing? That's because you don't like Black families. No. Yes, that's exactly what you're saying. And then you end up defending the racism argument when your whole idea is that we're trying to push back on this globalist agenda.
Exactly. So they're using their desire to help Black families get into housing as bait. They have no intention of doing that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That is a very good point.
Yeah.
So, Sean, what I heard is yay for Greg Abbott. Hopefully, other states will follow. We need transparency, and we need to make sure that we make the public aware of this evil agenda, this it's a one world government move to try to take property out of the hands of the people and put it in the hands of corporations and governments. And we got to push
Exactly.
back. That's what I heard.
Yeah. And see, the bottom line is for those of us who've been reading the scriptures, we know that there is a global one world government coming. And here's the deal. We are now seeing the evidence of that global government forming right before our eyes. And as we talked about in the pre-show, it's everywhere. I mean, pick an industry and there's evidence that we can see in that industry. It's like death by a thousand cuts. It's globalism by a thousand strategies.
Yeah, and I think, if you go all the way back into the 1930s and 40s when Hitler invaded Europe and he had, a desire for world domination, that never was going to get us to a one world government. A one world government actually is not one government owning the world. It's actually making all these other governments subservient to a single authority. And I think what you're saying, and which has not even been but possible until recent, is both the financial resources and the technology resources are making it possible for that to happen.
Exactly. And the one world government will be made possible because it will grow up as you and I have talked about so many times. It's being formed out of economics. It
It
will
is.
rise through commerce, and we are seeing that happen all over the place. I saw a clip of Tim Walz. The man was heavy on COVID mandates.
Oh, super
Heavy,
heavy.
heavy, heavy. And then there's a clip where he's just the opposite. He says, when it comes to our body, he said, it is none of your blank business.
Yeah, and in fact, if I could talk about Tim Walz for quite some time, but one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that he took the COVID mandates, he took the California model, doubled it, added steroids, and that's what he ended up with. He set up a consumer, maybe not consumer, a reporter hotline so that you could call and tattle on your neighbors if you saw them leaving the house to go to church, so that they could be fined or worse. Folks,
Or
this
just outside wearing a mask.
yeah, if you're outside not wearing a mask. Um, this is the kind of guy that Tim Walz is. He thinks that that's okay. And in reality, that's the exact kind of control we're talking about. Real estate is one avenue. The pandemic was another avenue. There will be many avenues in which the enemy, our spiritual enemy, seeks to gain control. But he only gets that authority when we let him.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Shaun,
Indeed.
closing thoughts.
Closing thoughts. We are living in the perilous times, and Jesus is coming back soon. And we are seeing prophecy. It's like peeling back like an onion. We are seeing it all over the place. And if you don't know Jesus, get to know him right away.
I just felt, even as you're saying that, I just felt that conviction. There's so many people, the people that listen to our podcast, we really don't have an idea whether or not you're believers or not, or if you just happen to know Shaun and I, and you listen for that reason, or you really enjoy the content. Hear me now. We do this because we have faith in Christ, and we feel strongly that what the Bible says is true, that is coming to pass, that Jesus died for our sins. And I would just ask you, what would happen if all of this came true, that control was enacted and you died or were crucified because for some other reason, maybe you're a conservative but not a believer, and you pushed back and you didn't survive that? Where would you go? Is your place in heaven secured because you've been bought by the blood of Christ and you've accepted it as your savior? Or can you not answer that question? I challenge you to search deep. Certainly respond to this video, comments, whatever. We'll reach out to you individually if you want to talk more.
Yeah, we have an email address that you'll find in the show notes. Please be sure to reach out to us. And it's simple. It's so simple.
Simple, indeed. Shaun, very important topic. Thank you for inviting me onto the show today. And thank you for covering this. Certainly everyone needed to know about this, and certainly in the real estate market.
That's for sure. Please don't sell your house to a corporation. Till next time.
Till next time.